All right, everybody, buckle up, because today we are diving deep, and I mean deep, into a story that's as fascinating as it is, honestly, kind of heartbreaking. We're talking about the life and times of Chris Chan.
It's one of those internet rabbit holes you can get lost in, for sure.
It really is. And to guide us through it, we're going to be spelunking through, well, there's no better way to put it, the CWCki.
For those who don't know,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
the CWCki is this massive, and I mean massive, user-created encyclopedia chronicling Chris's, shall we say, eventful life.
It's a whole wiki dedicated to one person, which I know sounds a little crazy.
It is a lot to take in.
But trust me, this deep dive, it's about so much more than just one life. It's about how fame, or infamy really, works online, the communities that pop up around it, and honestly, the responsibility we all have when someone's life becomes public domain.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the power of the internet, both good and bad, you know?
Totally. So, to really understand Chris Chan, we have to go back to the beginning. The CWCki goes deep into his childhood, and, well, it's not exactly sunshine and rainbows.
Definitely not. There's possible abuse, bullying. It paints a picture of someone who always felt like an outsider.
And that feeling, that need for connection, it becomes a recurring theme throughout his life, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And this is where we start to see those early signs of what would become lifelong fixations. Like, you have the Sonic the Hedgehog watch and win sweepstakes.
Oh yeah, the sweepstakes.
This is classic Chris Chan. Imagine. 11-year-old Chris wins this huge prize, a $1,000 shopping spree on his birthday, no less. Local news even covers it, focusing on the fact that Chris has autism.
It's like this unintentional foreshadowing, right? This early taste of attention, both positive and negative, that ends up defining so much of his life later on.
Totally. And while Chris says his time in middle school is pretty good, high school is where his social anxieties seem to get worse. The CWCki talks about this art award he thought he deserved, but didn't win.
Wait, so are we already seeing this pattern of Chris creating stories where he's the hero and anyone who disagrees with him is the villain?
100%. And it only gets stronger over time. Also interesting, Chris says he was on the honor roll all through high school, but after graduation, no plan.
Interesting.
Eh.
He puts so much stock in how smart he is, but there's this disconnect between his potential and what he actually does.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, could be partly because of the challenges that come with autism.
Could be.
Now, his time at Piedmont, Virginia Community College is where things get interesting, or I guess interesting in a new way.
Right, because he's got his driver's license, this all-consuming desire for a girlfriend, and that's when the love quest, as it's so delicately called online, really takes off.
And love quest is one way to put it.
It is. The CWCki goes into his whole attraction sign thing he did, which was, well, let's just say it involved very publicly looking for a boyfriend-free girlfriend.
Publicly might be an understatement. But that's peak Chris Chan, though, right? These big plans that are doomed to fail. And when they do fail, it's always, and I mean always, someone else's fault.
It's a potent cocktail of delusion, entitlement, and a truly astounding lack of self-awareness. And this is where the internet, in all its chaotic glory, really enters the chat.
Cue the internet lightning strike.
Right. Because remember those image boards we talked about? Like specifically 4chan. Well, picture this. It's late 2007. 4chan is like the Wild West of the internet back then. And someone stumbles upon Chris and his work.
It's almost like he was destined to go viral.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Chris's image, his comics, everything about him, it all becomes fuel for this new type of online humor. Raw, unfiltered, and, let's be honest, often brutally honest.
And incredibly invasive, right? Like, let's not forget about the Encyclopedia Dramatica article, a whole page dedicated to documenting and sometimes just making stuff up about Chris's life.
Yeah, that article, it becomes like the epicenter of Chris Chan lore, for better or worse. And it's important to remember, Chris was not ready for this kind of attention. He's not some celebrity with a PR team. He's a deeply vulnerable individual, and his reactions to this sudden unwanted fame, well, they just made things worse.
Oh, he definitely added fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
He tries to fight back, to control the narrative, but it backfires so badly. Like, remember that time he threatened to hold back Sonichu #7 unless they took down his ED article?
It's almost unbelievable that he thought that would work. It just shows his complete misunderstanding of how the internet works. You know, he's treating it like some business deal where he's got leverage. He was in way over his head.
It's like bringing a strongly worded letter to a nuclear arms race, just completely outmatched.
Exactly. And the CWCki goes deep on this period. They call it the classic era. It's just saga after saga, each one more outlandish than the last.
Like the medallion of the ass incident, come on, it's infamous for a reason.
Exactly. And it's obvious that Chris is being manipulated by this growing group of internet trolls, but it's here that we had a serious question. Where do we draw the line? I mean, yeah, Chris's actions and beliefs were strange, to say the least, but he was also a vulnerable person being exploited for entertainment. It's an ethical gray area.
It really is.
Yeah.
And as we move into the late 2000s and early 2010s, things start to unravel even more for Chris. His life, which is already playing out on this very public stage, takes some dark turns.
Yeah, the CWCki paints this picture of his behavior getting more and more erratic, and then you add on these personal tragedies. His father dies, the house fire, his own struggles with gender identity, all of this happening with the whole internet watching.
It's like his life became this distorted reality show with a global audience. And it's here, in this next chapter, with Chris at his most vulnerable, that the line between just watching this unfold online and actually getting involved, well, it gets really blurry.
Because this is where we meet the idea, guys, and this is where it gets kind of scary. We're not talking about regular internet trolls here, oh no. These are people who wormed their way into Chris's life, messing with his head, basically, just for kicks.
It's wild, right? Chris, desperate for any kind of real connection, completely falls for it. They feed in these crazy stories about being some kind of god merging dimensions, all this insane stuff. I mean, seriously.
It's textbook manipulation, like something out of a cult, except it's happening live on the internet with thousands watching and even encouraging it.
It's messed up on so many levels. This idea that someone could be so totally manipulated, their entire reality warped by a bunch of guys behind keyboards, like some kind of digital Truman Show gone wrong.
And the saddest part is, even when the idea guys were finally exposed, ran off by their own greed or whatever, the damage was done.
Exactly. Chris is left clinging to these made-up beliefs. His mental state just gets worse, and his behavior, well, it's all downhill for there.
The CWCki doesn't sugarcoat it. There's that incident where he pepper sprays a GameStop employee over, get this, the color of Sonic's arms on a game box.
Oh, man. I remember reading about that. Even the trolls were like, whoa, too far. It's this stark reminder that behind all the memes, all the online crap, there's a real person struggling.
Yeah. And tragically, it all ends in 2021 with Chris's arrest. Incest charges involving his own mother. It's a dark, disturbing end to a story that was already filled with so much sadness and exploitation.
Yeah, that's where any humor just disappears.
Yeah.
It stops being about internet weirdness and becomes about the very real consequences of online abuse, of what happens when people treat each other so terribly online.
Chris's story, it's a cautionary tale, no doubt. It reminds us that the internet, for all the good it can do, can also bring out the absolute worst in humanity.
Makes you think twice about what you post online, that's for sure. We started this whole deep dive talking about responsibility, and that's really what it comes down to, isn't it?
It really does.
We have a responsibility to think about the content we consume, the communities we're part of, and the impact our words and actions have on others, especially those who are vulnerable.
Couldn't agree more. Chris's story is a tragedy, no question. But if there's one thing we can take away from it, it's the importance of empathy, of remembering that there are real people on the other side of the screen.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. Was it this same online attention that made Chris Chan famous that ultimately led to his downfall? And if so, what does that say about fame, about fandom, about our responsibility to each other in this digital world?
Kamehameha!